we're fortunate enough to have some wonderful expert panel speakers, which are David Andrews from Epsilon, Lisa Moore from Alliant, Acho Nwana from KBM, and our moderator, Theresa Horn from Specialist Marketing Services. Thanks to Ken Kratzer from CBSI, who's going to be videotaping and for doing some photography. Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Lori Badman.
We'd also like to thank Dataline, who is our sponsor today. I don't think we have a representative here. I think they had a last-minute glitch. Dataline is a provider of, so I'll just give a spiel. Dataline is a provider of consumer marketing information, digital assets, and custom remodeling services through their vast proprietary consumer database of about 240 million individuals. Thank you so much, Dataline. Please see Maurice and myself if you're interested in becoming a board member for the HVDMA, as we do have a few positions available. Our board members are invaluable and essential, and we are looking for a few key people to contribute their expertise and experience to the board. It's a great group of people. We have a lot of fun, and if you're interested in this rewarding experience, please see us, and we'd love to speak to you about it. One other quick thing. As you may know, some of you may know that Jim Prendergast passed away earlier this year. He was an advocate and a longtime supporter of the HVDMA. There's a memorial dinner being held for him, I think June 22nd in New York City at Club 101. I believe it's at night, right? A night. So if anyone needs a copy of the invitations, interested in going, just please see us. We'll send you one. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll proceed with our program.
Today, we have a great expert panel here to discuss the advantages of utilizing the cooperative databases. We truly encourage you to ask questions today. We really would like this to be interactive and a conversation piece. I do have a little game. I have scratch-offs. For everybody that will ask a question to our panel will receive a scratch-off ticket. Okay, so.
I would like to winning scratch-off ticket.
We'll see if we can do that for you, honey. Great. Okay, I'll start the first question, and that means I get the first prize. You missed that part? I wasn't paying attention. Okay. So we'll start, and you guys can decide who wants to jump in on the first question. What is the best way to evaluate and select which cooperative databases to participate in? Yeah, David.
It's easy old concept of test 1, test 2, test 3. Ask your friends in the industry, what do you think are the best practices? And you will get so many different answers. Some people, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Theresa, tell us. Hard to hear. Can you hear me now?
The mic needs to be
No, it's not.
Or closer.
Test, hello?
No.
You guys?
Mine seems to be working. Lisa set it up that way. So. Yep.
I'm really technologically savvy. I found the on-off button. All right, we're good now. So I would say test away. If you ask a question about, how do you evaluate and how many should I be in, and those questions are all kind of related. I think you're going to hear a lot of different answers. Some people will tell you only need 1. Some people say you only need 2, and some people say be in as many as you can. But test, and I think that you have your options. There's several of these co-ops out there. And the thing to be careful of is, go with a core targeted test across multiple co-ops. And then as they all work, they'll all start off fine, I would imagine. As they all work, just make sure to do slow managed growth, because what you don't want to do is find yourself, okay, had a really great test result, and now I want to ramp up big volume. So if you go from a 10,000 name situation to a 500,000 name situation across 2 or 4 co-ops, suddenly you're going to get into an overlap scenario. So just make sure to do slow managed growth across multiple co-ops.
Yeah. The first thing that I would recommend is to think about what your offer is. All these co-ops, while they have most of the households in their base, some of them are skewed towards maybe not-for-profit. Some are skewed towards maybe catalog, and some might be skewed towards B2B. So co-ops have their strengths and weaknesses. So depending on your offer, you should ask questions: how big is your file, your base, on what I'm looking for? So that way you do not start with randomly picking a co-op because they have a huge base, or because they have skewed data, and so on and so forth. Is it relevant to your offer? I think that's very, very critical. And like he said, I believe that you should test multiple co-ops. You want to ultimately be able to see which one tends to give you the results that meet your success criteria. Never ever limit yourself to what co-ops to test, and always good to meet with the account managers, the statisticians, so that you can understand from different perspectives what they have to offer, and most importantly, I think, relationship. You want to pick the co-ops where you can work and have a good relationship with the account managers, and sometimes also the statisticians.
What they said. No. You know, the reason that co-ops exist, right, is this sort of shared environment and understanding the multi-enterprise purchasing behavior of a consumer. And really compiling data is an art, and selecting names is an art. And it's a function of, you know, your client. How big is their budget? How many names do you have to fulfill? If they have a small demand for data, 100,000 names, then maybe you only want to use 2 co-ops. If you have a tremendous goal of and a huge budget, and you're looking to source millions and millions of names, you're really going to need to have a multi-co-op answer. I would say, and certainly that question always comes up, right, when, how many should I be in? It really is about measuring who's providing incremental. Theoretically, the retail co-ops are all compiling the same information, right? And so, another thing to think about is co-op multis. A co-op multi isn't really a true multi. Like a multi-buyer, in the classic sense, is someone who bought from 5 different merchants. But if Abacus has those names, and iBehavior has those names, and let's say, another co-op has those names, when you put them into merge, they're all the same people. And so they're not necessarily a true individual purchase. Everybody has the same information, and so there's redundancies there, and it's definitely something that you need to consider. And that's why when you're using a multiple co-op strategy, it's important to understand the incremental, and then sort of measure one against the other, one against the whole. We're direct marketers, test and learn. And the other thing also, like Acho mentioned, is really, I think relationships are key, and it's chemistry. Are these guys listening to me? Do they understand me? Do I have a good relationship with my rep there? Because your experience with the co-op is going to be a function of how well they listen, how well they keep track of what you've done in the past, and they're protecting your investments with them.
Does anybody else have a question?
I have a question. I found that co-ops want monthly new names and added, so that you can add it into your database. But you don't run new models every month. You don't build new models every month. So why would I release my brand new names, my hotline names that I'm mailing to, so that you can have it and sit on it, give it to other mailers? I don't see how.
May I clarify? I just want to clarify. So what you're saying is that a co-op is asking you to provide a monthly update, but you yourself are not ordering any media that month?
I'm ordering lists, but you don't build a new model.
So
you run new models, but you don't build them.
So I don't know the way all the co-ops work, but
I'm talking average.
okay. So if you this is an easy answer. So whatever model it is, part of your continuation strategy. Okay, call it an affinity model. It doesn't matter. it's newly scored every single time. So it actually leverages the freshest data that you send, and that's what will enable you to see that consistent performance. If you stop updating, because it's scored, think about it, if we're profiling and mirroring exactly what your most recent buyers look like from a transactional trend standpoint, we're going to find everybody with that same spend-alike behavior that's recent. And I will tell you, having been a client once upon a time and of multiple co-ops, there was a time where I was in the test phase and it worked, but I didn't want to burn into the monthly contribution thing yet, and results started off gangbusters. And then 5 months later, they fell into the toilet, and when they said, it's like, oh, well, you need to send an update. And when we did, the results shot right back up. So I've actually seen it firsthand that is definitively true.
No, I have not necessarily seen that, but as you mentioned at the beginning, you said when you first test a co-op, I'm sure it will do well, but be careful with the rollout. And why is that? Why aren't your segment one all created equal?
There's a lot there. So you're saying, I guess, from a standpoint of it's the same exact model type, so it's always an affinity model or a synergy or whatever type of model it might be, and how come the performance isn't exactly the same month over month over month? Well, in large part, I think that's direct mail. For one, it could have to do with a lot of things. It could have to do with mail fatigue and merge strategy, and I mean those are certainly variables that come into play. But some models also are built to be extremely targeted, right? If you only need 10,000 names a month, you can go get this type of model over here, and it's going to do really, really well for you. And then suddenly you need 1 million names a month. You don't use that same model for that. So there's a way to establish, and it takes some testing, the right model strategy so that you can gain that consistent performance over time. And maybe this very, very targeted model is something that you want to continue to take, because if it works so well sometimes, you don't want to lose that. So maybe you order that one, if you're a monthly mailer, let's just say, order once every 3 months. But then from your monthly strategy standpoint, there's other models for you so that you could get that sort of positive, profitable consistency.
Can I address your first question, or maybe concern? Again, all co-ops are different. I know for sure, at iBehavior, all co-ops are different. And at iBehavior, we actually rebuild a model with the updates that we receive from all the contributing members. So you're not just sending it for sending's sake. When we get the update, we run an update of our base every week. So that way, we always have additional information. There are always new members joining with new transactions. And that way, we are able to take advantage for all the contributing members when they come back to take names. Okay, so we do definitely build new models every time to take advantage of these additional updates we receive. And then to add to his explanation of why you will not see consistency, you test the segment one of your model, your affinity model, and then subsequently it's not as strong as it used to be. Again, fatigue and all that. One of the things we recommend is do not make the segments so small that you hit a home run the first time and then things fall off subsequently. We recommend that you think about the segment size with relation to your rollout. You do not, I'd rather have a consistent response index of 100 over 5 or 6 campaigns than have an index of 200 in the first campaign, 150 the next one, 100 the third one, and then it falls all the way, goes all the way down. So for consistency, you have to make sure that you set your segment sizes accordingly, according to how your roll-up is going to look like.
I would add, like, the whole concept of a co-op is everybody collaborating, right? And so when you're using these co-ops, it's quid pro quo, sort of, you put data in to take data out. And so the concept of a co-op, it's what's good for one is good for everyone, right? So there's the spirit of this data sharing that sort of you're benefiting and so is everyone else. You know, it's good for the client in that you use the most current information to inform the analytics. You don't get sold your same data back, so when you update, then, you know, if you're prospecting out of the co-op, you're going to suppress your house names, and so you want them to have as much of your data as possible. And it also brings to light another challenge, you know, that sometimes I've seen in my career with inconsistent performance is sort of list level variables. So if not everybody updates their list and you have a list that's sort of driving one of your affinity models and they go out of business or they forget to update or what have you, that sometimes can lead to inconsistent performance. You know, at Alliant, we sort of, you know, we don't allow that. So unless your data matches 2 or 3 other sources, it's never ever going to be selected or make it into anybody's model. And because we do that, that eliminates this reliance on lists and leads to pretty consistent performance over time. Yeah, so that's what I would say about that.
Great, thank you. Does anybody? Press the button.
Is it red? Is it lit? And it's working.
Okay, does anybody else have another question? Go ahead, Fred.
So I have some clients that we do co-op work with, and they seem to sometimes see inconsistencies within segment sizes, let's say 1 through 10. They're taking 1 through 10. There'll be a few months where segment sizes 1 and 2 might see considerable drop off, and all of a sudden segment sizes 4 and 5, which are theoretically built to be, don't have the same index when you're looking at them when they're first presented. But any insights as to why? Is that, you know, what I think is a lot of folks just come in and taking segments 1 and 2. So is that a little bit of mail fatigue, or is there a way to, you know, we try to figure out a strategic way to go about that. Not everyone has a budget to mail 1 through 10.
I would love to go first.
Okay.
I know, I'm so excited.
Softball.
It's really a function of the business, right? I mean, if you think about retail, 70% of all the transactions are in Q4 for holiday, right? And so sometimes if it's, you know, if let's say you're a monthly mailer, you may be seeing inconsistencies because all the data, the most transactions and the most discretionary spending and purchasing are in Q4. And so earlier in the year, your segment sizes may be smaller because there's less people buying at that moment. Does that make sense?
That does, but for a few clients of mine, they do not have seasonality.
Oh.
So
they don't, but the data, the co-op itself as an asset does, right? Because it's a collaborative environment.
So if you're mirroring, you're doing a mirror model, it should catch that, shouldn't it?
So,
On segment size.
is the model or models that you're describing, are they kind of the smaller, more targeted models, or are they some of these bigger sort of depth solutions like Abacus One or IQ and stuff like that?
So one's an Abacus One. I think we do Acho with fusion models that we work on, and we have response models and backend models.
So if I could answer about the larger depth solutions, and I believe all the co-ops have some of these great big volume depth solutions. You guys call it IQ, right? And so for us it's Abacus One. You guys might have something like that.
Yeah, it's like an optimization.
Yeah. And so it's a very different type because all of those take into account multiple models, right? So it's a very different type of fulfillment solution than a straight linear regression model. So when you consider a traditional linear regression model, and rank 1 is going to have making up a 300 index, and rank 2 a 200 index, etc. Okay, in a large depth solution, you have to kind of remove the sort of rank by rank index thinking and think about it more as a sort of continual response curve. So if you look at a response curve for a traditional regression model, it's going to look kind of like a downward slope, a really high at the beginning, and when you get to rank 10, it's going to be really bad. For one of these greater depth solutions, it's sort of medium high, and it's very flat for a very long time. That's in a back-tested environment. In reality, flat means it could be a little bit hiccupy, and that's probably what you're seeing. And I would say, and this is speculation, you're probably right also that maybe there's less competition in the mailbox as you stray away from the target a little bit. If you're in a competitive sort of vertical, that could very well be.
So would you say that's a good test if you decided to omit segments 1 and 2 and then see how maybe 7 and 8 or mail them? I think they're all good test ideas, and it's kind of what Acho said earlier. Careful not to get too granular, because you're in those big depth environments. It's not the index by index. It's we see it all the time. 150,000 name depth is 2% response, and 150 to 300,000 name depth is 2.05% response, right? But in reality, in this example that I'm picking up, that particular client might be able to go to 1 million names and establish a pretty consistent flat response. And that's what those big depth solutions provide.
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think from my experience, the primary problem with the situation you described is fatigue. If you keep doing the same thing, using the same model methodology, you are going to continue to rank the same people at the top of your model. And then you keep fulfilling. Obviously, eventually the fatigue issue will catch up with you. The solution we have, and most of the co-ops have, is they will offer you a different model methodology. Different models tend to find different names. Some straightforward models will find the most obvious, and other models would use other approaches, interactions, and whatever you want to call it, to find those non-obvious prospects. So the point is, you cannot continue to mail the same 100,000 people and expect that performance will stay the same. It doesn't happen. The key is knowing when things are beginning to fall below your acceptable, and then rest that model, if possible, and test new approaches, then come back to it later when essentially those names have been well rested.
So how does somebody make that happen without losing? So as a mailer, if there's a consistent result, let's say a fusion model, we've seen that in January, February, March. Will the representatives say, okay, you should take a break on it because you're about to hit a downward curve and you're about to lose money on a certain campaign, you should go to XYZ model.
Yeah,
so how do we know when it's time to hit the brakes and then?
Yeah, so I always encourage my clients to please share results with us on a consistent basis every time, because part of my responsibility is track performance drop by drop. And if I have that information, I would advise you very quickly. I say, this model is beginning to drop and I think it's going to go below your acceptable. It's probably time to change and do something different. So that's why the relationship between us is very important. We need to be in touch, share results, which is what we do. And without it, we've had challenges. We got together, we discussed it, we ran some analysis, and we came back with alternative solutions, and we saw things go back up. So Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but once we are talking, I think we'll be able to make that decision at the right time.
Thank you. I think it's 5 tickets.
Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to ask right now? Okay, Fred, you could be on it. All right, the next question is, what are the best ways to leverage cooperative databases for multi-touch campaigns, such as direct mail, social, digital?
Okay. So we all know that co-ops found their roots in direct mail, originally with catalogs, and that's, I don't think, any secret to anybody in the room. And so they've evolved so much, and it's these models, and whether it be modeling your customer file to sort of optimize and get the best performing customer names that you already have, or for prospect audiences, all these models that have been traditionally used for direct mail can all be now onboarded to the main 4 social networks: Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, many forms of display, onboard names to the DSP of your choice, or to we have a conversant ad network, and other co-ops have their own proprietary properties as well. And it's addressable TV is another one. And email, of course, has been around a while. So when you consider that all that stuff is available, if you are an advertiser or mailer client and you have some results in some existing channels, you have to really assess what's going on with social. So what I hear a lot in Facebook advertising is, yes, I've uploaded my current client list and I'm serving ads to that, my current customer list, I'm serving ads to them. And I do a Facebook lookalike model, and I could establish maybe a 2 million or a 4 million size lookalike model in Facebook, and then after that it really trickles off. And Facebook is a monster. We all know Facebook is great. But Facebook has Facebook-only data. It's very good data, but like any dimension of data, by itself, it has its own limitations. And that's going to vary depending on what kind of advertiser you are. So, and I focus more on Facebook in this answer because it seems like everybody is on Facebook. That's kind of why I'm steering it in this direction. And so you have to then ask yourself, is this advertiser going to be able to achieve a greater audience without some sort of external custom data set being onboarded? And most of the time that answer is no. So that's the way to grow an existing channel that you're already in, right? Facebook works for me, great. What point does it work up? Okay, 2 million, 4 million, great. If they could build a lookalike model of 55 million, probably they don't need to onboard an external data set. So that's one sort of key takeaway. I would say it's a pretty direct answer to something I bump into a lot. You guys want to add anything?
I think that's great.
I would say, I mean, we're all sitting here, we're consumers. Consumers don't just get devoted to one channel, right? You're multi-screen viewing, you're watching TV, you have your iPad in your lap, you probably have your cell phone in your hand. So I think consumers, they're agnostic about advertising and the experience that they want. And so, if you're a direct marketer, I think the onus is on you to sort of be cognizant of the other channels and sort of test into them. The idea that you're investing in all this direct mail to get into somebody's mailbox is super. It's a huge investment. It makes sense to take advantage of all of these digital channels to reach them where in the other places they are. I mean, Facebook clearly, that's it's person-based. It typically skews older. Direct mail's an older channel. It's certainly, in my experience, a go-to place to start evaluating. We've seen digital support direct mail and provide incremental lift in terms of performance. You can, in terms of multi-touch, you could also use email. You can use the same model that you're building offline, or you can even look at your digital-only, sourced purchases and build a special model. And really, I would encourage you, we're direct marketers, test and learn. And to really use those channels. I mean, I think you'd be remiss if you didn't. Certainly if you think about your own personal experience, we all use these channels.
Yes. I know just from my own experience, what are you seeing as a lift with which channels are working best, like with offline and email or offline social email, or like what's the lift you're seeing that you're getting the highest response from?
Offline email.
Offline and email together.
I'll say it's all over the place, and often difficult to measure.
Right.
We see direct mail and Facebook. I think that may have a lot to do with the verticals that I work with, though. So I don't want to mislead anybody into saying that there's not other benefits out there, but we do see the direct mail combination with Facebook because those channels convert, and the verticals that I work with, which is the direct-to-consumer sort of group of advertisers out there, they're interested in conversions. They're not interested in branding, big branding, or anything like that. So, we see success there.
It's definitely important too that the client is prepared to do it. You know what I mean? I've seen a lot of tests go awry. We're like, oh, I want to do digital, and then, you know, their landing page is horrible and they're not set up, and so. Like David said, it really depends, and you know, you have to make sure that you have a really dialed in strategy so you can get the right result. Or you're promoting certain things, like it really needs to be, if you're going to do it, when you tackle it, it really needs to be a well thought out test.
Yeah, and also to add to that, we've had some clients that wanted us to build them the omni-channel model. And you need to understand that your offer would sometimes dictate whether it's going to be beneficial for you to look at Facebook, social media, and so on. If your offer appeals to the 75 plus age group, do you really want to be looking at Facebook as omnichannel model? So we've had some clients where they insisted that we look at omnichannel, and we went through the whole process, and they finally convinced them that, you know what, this is not for us. And then there are those offers that it's a no-brainer. You've got to do omnichannel. So again, we are there for you guys. Meet with us. Let's talk about what we can do. I mean, is this right for us? Do we have what it takes, and so on? These are conversations you must have with your the co-ops to help you understand how you can set up and be able to have these omnichannel campaigns successful.
Question for David. I'm doing a couple of large Facebook campaigns. I found that Friends of Friends work really well. And I'm wondering if you can apply a co-op to that, because you still get a big audience in many cases.
Friends of Friends, can you elaborate a little?
Well, it's one of the 4 selections you have on Facebook. You can go to current enrollment, you can go to Friends of Friends, you can go to lookalikes, and I forget the 4th. And it's vastly better when we did Friends of Friends than when we went into segmentation routines. And so I'm wondering if you can then apply, because you can still get a vast audience on for a big customer, big client, if you can then apply what you're talking about to then Friends of Friends.
So the answer is yes, it could be applied, probably. So the short answer to your question is we have the ability, all of us, to profile different groups and build different models for you. So even if it's one model type, although with the affinity model, whatever, and I could model this certain profile group, and those came from a Friends of Friends campaign that you did. We're intentionally profiling that. We can intentionally profile another group, your best buyers, and and profile another group, your low frequency but high transaction buyer. So, and those will inevitably find different audiences, and we can onboard all of that, and so it can be done.
So the $10 million question for the last 10 years has been allocating results back to the correct source of the name. What are you guys doing for recommendations when people come back to you and say, who gets the credit for that purchase?
We do. I can answer this, but I don't want to hog the stage here.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I mean, I'm all about fairness, so I would recommend allocating them. Allocate all the randomly allocate them in the merge, and then decide, and then run what ifs, right? Then put one on the top, one on the other. I mean, if you have a good relationship with your data partner, I would run all of those scenarios and really try and isolate who's giving me the most value.
Holdout panels, then, essentially, right? Kind of what.
I mean, everybody wants their data at the top, right? Put me at the top of the merge. You know what I mean? But I mean, you don't really get a true answer, right? So you really want to understand.
Well,
sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's also very important to understand how each of the co-ops truly perform, because I've seen situations where client says, well, you guys are just not doing well. The other co-ops, A, B, and C are doing better than you guys. But then when we do some match back and look at exactly what we do, we find out we actually did really well. But because of the multis and allocations, we look bad. So when the clients are able to understand exactly the true performance of the different co-ops, it will help them to make better decisions about who to use, how much to take from each of the co-ops, and particularly who is bringing them incremental universe.
Anybody else? I have these lotto tickets. There's two going to that table right there. All right, I'll pose another question then to the panel. How can the co-ops assist mailers with customer file marketing strategy, such as house file reactivation?
We all have answers. So everybody joins the co-ops for prospecting, everybody. And once clients are inside of a co-op, they eventually test some form of customer file modeling, house file optimization, all has different names, different tweaks, differences, but the ability to take your customer file and model it with our data, right? And it's actually very different, I could say for advocacy anyway, it's a very different and very effective modeling technique than what we would do for prospecting. And it's very proven. And so, and it's strong. I see your results, man. You're doing well too. And you know, so a customer comes to a co-op and doesn't think, how do I, I'm going to get better house file modeling out of this. It's just not the mindset when they come on board. But there's similar to prospecting, off-the-shelf modeled audiences that can be shipped to whatever service bureau, mail house of your choice. In addition to that, scores can be run, this sort of customer file modeling, and scores can actually be appended back to your database. So if you have a statistician in-house who wants to build their own models and do their own selections, they can use these scores provided by co-ops in conjunction with what they were already doing from a house file modeling strategy. So maybe they're doing their own modeling internally based on demographic data and other type of stuff like that. And then when you add scores based on transactional data, it really is the sort of the other half of how do I combine what people look like and how are they going to behave. So reactivation modeling is one of the strengths of co-ops aside from prospecting. And the reason why it works so well for clients is because we have additional transactions of the client's customers that they don't know about. So if a client sells women's apparel, we know other women's apparel transactions they are making outside of the clients. We also know who they are donating to, not-for-profit. We know every vertical, what they're doing, how much they're spending, how recently they spent. So if you think about it, most of the clients would do reactivation of certain segments of their inactive file.
and then they'll ask the co-ops to take the rest, maybe those that are beyond 5 years, to see if they can find any life in that segment. And it's amazing how well co-ops work because, again, of all the depth of transactions that they have. So one of the things we try to do after establishing that we can help our clients find good prospects is to help them understand that there is opportunity in their file for us to help them with reactivation. Additionally, like David said, we also can score the customer file with different types of scores and help them use those scores for their internal modeling, and it's amazing how well those work.
When you talk about mindset, Alliant's mindset when we launched 17 years ago was really about optimization. That's our progeny, right? We were saving Columbia House from the 10 CDs for 1 cent offer, right? How many of us built our CD collection from Columbia and KBMG and all? So they're running soft offer free trials, and there's a bill and a shipment and an invoice, and then there's this concept of direct mail responsiveness and payment. Is this person going to pay me or are they not, right? And so from Alliant's perspective, that really has been the thing that, you know, that's one of our strongest products, right? We've always been about response and pay. You know, and as the business evolved, and you know, we did too, right? But the nature of the data that we capture, we're capturing the shopping cart data just like everybody else, but we actually go the extra mile and we capture bad behavior too. So I always use a retail, you know, I use a Zappos example, right? I want a pair of Manolos, but I don't know if I'm a 6.5, a 7, or an 8, and they have free shipping, free returns, right? So I'm gonna order 3 pair of shoes from them. And that, my bill is gonna be $1,200 or however Manolos cost, right? But I only want 1 pair and I'm gonna return the other ones, right? And the retailer has a huge opportunity cost to take it back, pay the shipping, restock it, all of those things. So there's value in understanding, you know, as far as I know, that, you know, in my experience, no one else is really sort of amending and saying, oh, this is a bad person. Like, her credit card got declined 5 times, and you know, we ought to write her off, and all those things. And so understanding negative behaviors is really important in optimization too. And that's one of the things Alliant brings to the table. And I would say, like, you know, in terms of lapsed buyers, if it's a lapsed customer, they know your brand, right? Like, they are already familiar with you. The thing that you might not know is, are they a good payer? Are they responsive now? Have they bought recently? Is that important? And so Alliance optimization really allows you to understand the likelihood that someone's going to respond to the channel that you're using, and then also pay. And so optimization is something that we love to do. And yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Fred's asking us all the hard ones.
You talked a little bit about retention. You talked about reactivation just now. What about at the other end of the relationships where you've got existing customers that could try to go with competitors? Are there some just examples or applications that your co-ops offer to help me as a CRM marketer identify which segments of my population, of my customer base are safe and they're going to loyally stay with me, and which ones are at risk of going to a competitor beyond, you know, what I know about them and my own transactions?
There you go first.
So that would be what we consider, again, special project, in the sense that if you are concerned about attrition or having a segment of your customers move to your competitor, then we will have to essentially take your file, those customers, and see what they're doing in your space with other clients, and see if They are more active, they are more recent transactions, how much they are spending compared to what they are doing with you and how recently they've made transactions, and then put together some reports and share with you, and then obviously we will not tell you who they are purchasing from because we are a blind co-op, but we will share with you on average what they are doing, and hopefully that will help you to make some decisions about how to incent them to continue to purchase from you.
We're finding we're doing a decent handful now of share of wallet analyses that really help with the loyalty aspect, kind of what you're asking, and so that is available. Yeah, so that's really
good. Yeah, I mean, and the co-ops really, the beauty of the co-op is understanding what your customer's doing when they're not buying from you, right? And so I think everybody sort of has the ability to give you an answer there. And I think the technology's been there to do all kinds of segmentation, but I think a lot of marketers don't, you know what I mean? And so when it comes to CRM, you know, have you really looked, what kind of arithmetic concentrations of buyers do you have? Are you sending the same message to everyone, or are you really sort of dialing in and trying to have a more personal relationship with those consumers? And so I would encourage you to sort of think about, you know, looking at your messaging strategy and certainly leveraging your co-op relationships to understand what are your customers buying when they're not buying from me. Like, what else do they like? What, you know, what's their behavior in other places? And I think you can use that to sort of build out a dialed-in outreach strategy.
Fred, you had a question?
My question was for Lisa. On the optimization paid model, do you find that folks that you do not, you disqualify, and so your model fails, do you ever suggest putting those model fails back in and remodeling them after a certain period of time? So somebody might have bad credit, you know, in 2015. They might have moved up 50 points in their credit score. Now they're an optimal person.
Well, it's true, Fred. People change over time. I mean, you know, just look at someone who gets divorced, right? You know, they like, the way we build our models is we do it with an archive date, and so based on your behavior at that moment in time. And so I would say yes, right? And there's seasonality in the business, and there's all kinds of business reasons to sort of look at that. Remember, if you got high response, you got low pay, right? And so they're opposing forces, and so there's nuances there in terms of what's your goal, right? Maybe your allowable goes up for, you know, because you want, you know, you would make a business decision, and my allowable goes up, and I want more responders, and I don't care what the back end looks like. You know, that kind of optimization is going to be different than, oh, I need to, you know, bring in someone that has an average order of X, or, you know what I mean, and then you would be more concerned about payment and your response rate would be suffering. And so those are really business decisions based on what's going on in your campaign at that moment. And then, you know, I would definitely encourage you to have the conversation, and you're right, you should absolutely consider those kind of things.
Question, there are a lot of sources out there that maybe 5 years ago a potential client might not look at. But you now have the web generating names, you have people registering on websites, you have people being handled in a call center environment. Do you have any of your clients currently giving you those sources and modeling those sources in any way that you're seeing success?
Yes. We get.
We agree, yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Next question.
A lot of our clients are bringing in customers from almost every source you can think of, and asking us to work with them. The key is knowing the channel of contact. If a client is going to do direct and they are bringing in responders from search engines or any other source, you better be very careful or it's going to be a disaster. We have ways to massage those guys to make it work, but it's usually not something that you know. It's very critical that you ask questions and make sure that the solution has to do with the channel of contact. So yes, we do take care of that.
Does anybody else have any questions? It's 2 o'clock and we can take one more. Okay, if not, I encourage you to speak to the 3 expert panelists we have here today. Oh yes, Donna.
I'd like to hear across all 3, I think there's certainly some competition, right? So how do you all work together? Because there are a lot of mutual clients, right? And I would imagine that, you've seen it, that there's a way to work with all, at least 3 of you, and I one's here and others.
Well, yes, very quickly, I want to give you an example. We once had a client that was essentially telling us, all the co-ops, that we just don't know what we're doing, and asking us to suppress every single campaign that they've had for 1 year. And this client mails every month and takes about 250,000 to 500,000 every month. And eventually nothing worked for this client. And the client was cursing at everybody. I actually flew out to Colorado and hooked up with Abacus. And we actually sat down together and cooperated and then talked to the client together, and were able to convince the client that they were doing the wrong thing, and without us working together, we would not have gotten that done. It has happened twice to me in the last 7 years, where I had to cooperate with my colleagues in the other co-ops and solve a problem for the client. So we might be competing for revenue, but we also really, believe it or not, work together and respect each other. And why not? iBehavior, majority of the iBehavior staff used to work at Abacus.
One quick question on kind of my area. In financial services, any use of co-ops and credit scores to target credit customers?
We have something, credit scores, but at the ZIP +4 level. You know, when it comes to credit and financial services, as you know, there are lots of legal issues. You cannot load their transactions, but we work with them, and we have created some credit, pseudo credit data that we use, and we've been very extremely successful building models, and even for credit cards and insurance companies. And so that's actually one of our strengths, dealing with the credit. Obviously, credit is their bread and butter. And again, we have cooperated in some situations to solve some problems for clients, and we're more than happy to work with you guys.
So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you to our panelists. Great conversation today. We appreciate that. If anybody has any specific questions, they're here. Also, Wyland is here. Feel free to speak with them directly. Thank you. I think we're going to do some door prizes.
Yeah, I think he's missing some. Maybe I did this project. Put your business card in. We get everybody's business card?
Mine was not.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. You know what? And I there's a little receipt. No, I did. Mine was going to. I'm sorry. Remember IMP? And I just really want to. Yes, I can. I got from the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Take one to pick. Here, Lisa, you pick the first one. Oh, it's back today. Can I pick up?
We have 3